So yeah, it's been a while. I've been sick as a dog, and videos have been hard. Um, and I sometimes I use what I talk about here for my much more professionally produced channel, Navigating Patterns. And so to that end, I wanted to talk about the nature of parasitic things. So I was, as I often do, going through in my head things about Jordan Peterson's art conference and this sort of worldly events, right? And what I would say in certain conversations, how what I would give as a speech, right? Things like that, like, well, how does this play out, right? So one of the things I was thinking of is I don't think people understand the nature of the parasite. They don't see it. And if there's one place you should be able to see it pretty clearly, it's the computer industry. It's tech. It's already gone parasitic. And you can panic about that or whatever, but I want to give the example because I think it's undeniable. I think it's as clear as a bell. I don't think you could come up with an easier, simpler example in the quote age of gnosis, which hopefully I'll be talking about it at some point here on my Substack. The bottom line is AI knows how, or is being trained now, how to build software. It already can kind of almost program. Now, look, I've used AI for programming. It's terrible, freaking awful. There's certain things it does very well, which I would classify as scripting. I've sort of hinted at this before. In the old days, there were, you know, sort of software engineers, and then there were people who script. If you knew Visual Basic or Excel macros, you were a scripter, right? And it right in the middle of programming, where you could use Visual Basic to write, or some database language like Foxit or whatever to write software. That's different from software engineering, right? It's sort of three different categories: people who can script things, that's sort of variables and recursion; people who can program, who can think sort of one level up and sort of write complicated things. AI is excellent at scripting, terrible at programming, and it's useless at software engineering, according to my tests. And I've tested 5 of them so far on very simple things. Now, it's not to say they can't do the work. In some cases, they can. Unfortunately, they do the work much more slowly than I can, like by several orders of magnitude slowly. Trying to get them to correct simple errors that take no time for me is just time consuming, ridiculously time consuming. And the prompt engineering involved is absurd and unnecessarily so. So that's good to know. And you could fight back and say, look, Mark, that's because these AIs, they just don't have good sample code. That's true. So they're not well trained for that, or they haven't been specifically trained for that. That's false. There's a problem with the AI's understanding of abstraction as such. When you don't understand abstraction, you don't understand scopes, namespaces, right? You don't understand those things. And so you can't correct simple basic errors in those things. And the fact that we have very advanced programming languages that take care of a lot of that for you is a bad thing because they don't do a good job of it, right? They actually do a terrible job of it and create all kinds of bugs. I talked about that before. This thing still doesn't work. I wish it did. That'd be great. So, updates on this. I think we're at 45 a week. Just ridiculous. I mean, there were some days where it's 15 updates. I'm like, I have 100 apps, maybe 110 apps. You're updating 15 a day? What are you doing? And there's no change, like nothing changed that I can tell. Something changed, but I don't know what it was. So we're living in this accelerated world, ridiculously accelerated world. And AI can program. And so the computers are eating their own tail. Like at some point, the novel programming stuff has to come out of humans again. And it hasn't been for some time. We've just been chasing our own tail, right? Eating our own tail, consuming our own flesh in some real sense, that cycle's already played out. Where it would play out first in technology that definitionally moves ahead of the curve. And you could argue that art already did this. Sure, that argument's made 1,000 times over. May or may not be relevant. But in technology, for a materialist, you can totally see it. Materialists have a hard time with art, but not so hard with technology, even though something like software is completely non-material. Go figure. That industry is eating itself. If AI can program and people are using AI to write software to automate processes, what's going on? That's the parasitic nature of the technology that we've created. Like, I'm not saying it's all bad or anything like that, but we're not really seeing where things are non-generative or parasitic. I did a live stream on generative on my Navigating Patterns channel. Things need to be generative, right? Otherwise, you have nothing for the parasite to eat, right? So you have to generate in excess of the parasitic nature of the thing, or you're in trouble. And I don't see that as being what we're doing now. So that's a little worrisome to me. And look, we can make arguments left, right, and center about whether or not that's true and how true that is and how relevant that is, et cetera, et cetera. But my main point with this video is to highlight that's what a parasite is. It's when the thing starts to self-consume. Where does AI get its programming data from? Software that was written long ago, right? Or maybe not so long ago, but software it didn't write. And because it didn't write it, it's parasitic upon that. And you can say, look, I create new novel combinations of code. Is that software engineering? Yes, computers can try lots of combinations of things. That's true. And doing that, it can find the mysteries to how many digits pi has, can find the mystery to certain paradoxes and mathematical theorems that have yet to be tested, because it can just test a lot of stuff really fast. And you can argue AI is a vast improvement on that because it narrows the field of the number of tests it has to run and makes them, reasonable again. Maybe that's possible. I don't think that's good, though. It might be a small advantage, but at the end of the day, what's the cost? That's what you're not looking at. It's not the cost of the electricity. It's not the cost of the minerals and the refinement of the minerals and the electricity to refine the minerals to use more electricity later when you turn the damn thing on. Or the workers and the work days and the hours that people, it's all of that. And that is vaster than you can imagine. No, really. Just the project of coding something, small embedded system for a phone or for a Raspberry Pi, a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of life energy goes into that. And then it burns electricity. And all the electricity that got burned to build it, to design it, to screw it up, tape it out, put it together, build a manufacturing plant, have the manufacturing plant run. Like, there's no accounting for the $35 cost of a Raspberry Pi. I don't know how it's that cheap. It can't be that if you just built the Pi by itself, it would be $35. The building of a $35 computer like this, with all of these crazy ports and all of these chips, is parasitic upon building the chips for my laptop, for the desktop, for the servers, running the AI, right? That infrastructure, because it's so big, has space in it, right? You can't, it's not efficient, not at scale. Things aren't efficient at scale. You kind of can't account for it. So then it begs the question, well, if the Pi at $35 is parasitic upon a larger industry, and then that's enabling AI, which was parasitic upon the stuff that came before, and then AI is parasitic upon the programmers and soon the design engineers that built the laptops and the desktops and everything that bore the industry, where does that end? And I don't think it ends in a good place. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm just not seeing it. I'm not saying like we have to stop doing anything or change doing anything necessarily, but we have to consider what parasitic behavior is and what it means to be generative in excess of that parasitic load to keep the technology running. And I sort of talked about this before with Bitcoin in one of my What is Money videos, of which I have two, plus one on the economy. All three are great. That's on navigating patterns. Effectively, Bitcoin is indexed ultimately to the price of electricity because it takes electricity to mine or exchange Bitcoin. So the electricity cost of mining Bitcoin is fixed at the time it's mined, but then to move it, that electricity cost changes over time. And it's not the cost of a single transaction, because one transaction has to be vetted across 51% of the network at a minimum to be a valid transaction. Otherwise, it can be backed out, at least in theory, and almost certainly would in practice. Look, I'm not saying I can understand mathematically what that means. I don't think anyone can. I think it's one of the big holes in these systems people come up with that are parasitic by nature. Bitcoin's parasitic upon the entire computer industry, the entire hardware industry, the entire software industry. And the fact that they've gone down these little tunnels and holes with ASIC design miners and all this crazy stuff, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but also there's a problem there. And ultimately, that's going to come crashing down. Just something to think about. I hope you have chickens and grow food, because that is minimally parasitic if it's parasitic at all. And if it's done right, it's not parasitic at all. It's generative. But this technology stuff, man. And again, I'm not calling for change. I'm not saying we must revolt against the machines. We must all become like. I am on the internet, on YouTube, for freak's sake. I mean, come on. I've got my wonderful Yeti mic and all this great stuff, and my super high-end laptop, and my old laptop still running, and a big AI desktop in the other room. Like, I love this stuff. A bunch of old computers in the shed, all kinds. But we have to think about this a little bit more closely, and we have to notice the nature of something parasitic. When the AI is writing software, the software industry has parasitized itself. The software industry wrote software that writes software. That can't end well. And again, it doesn't do a very good job yet. And I don't think it ever will do a very good job. That's a technical opinion at this point. I'm not claiming to be a super expert on that stuff, although I have a lot more AI experience than 99% of the people talking about AI, because I've been doing it for 15 years. For real, from scratch, from like AI's written in C. So I have the books on the bookshelf. I'm not going to parade them in front of you. You can take my word for it or call me a liar. I don't care. I don't even know you. Sorry. This idea of the parasite is important. And I think it's exemplified in AI with AI programming. To some extent, greater or lesser. I mean, again, right now, it looks like you've put a lot more effort into making the AI program than you could put in learning programming and being a good programmer yourself. That's not true in the short term, obviously, because it takes a long time to be a good enough programmer to out-program an AI for the average person. That's fair, man. That's totally fair. But what is the cost? Because I don't know the back-end cost of me running Bard and asking it to write code, or ChatGPT, or Claude, or what was the other one? I forget. Anyway, there's a bunch of them. I probably have them all up in tabs somewhere on my browsers, but I have so many browser tabs I could never track them. There's a bunch of them. And I don't know what that back end cost actually is. I know it's very high. I know that. You look at the bill OpenAI is paying, right? You look at how much money NVIDIA is making. You're like, where's that money coming from? And that's only the money the company's making, right? Like, somebody buys a bunch of AI hardware and then they have to hire a bunch of people to use that AI hardware. I don't know what that costs. And they have to buy some training data. I don't know what that costs. Uh, I I don't know. I mean, it's billions for sure. Are they making billions? Nah. Nope, they are not. And that's normal in an industry. A lot of that stuff will shake out, right? You'll end up with three big providers, probably Google, Microsoft, and OpenAI or something. Maybe one other one, or two or three other tiny stragglers in, sort of key markets, verticals we call them in business. But the exemplification of the parasitic nature of these things, and all industries go through this cycle. Like, I'm not demonizing it. I'm just saying this is the parasite. Political systems become parasitic. Economic systems become parasitic. This pattern that I think, if you're watching my personal channel here, you can see more clearly because technology is everywhere. And that's sort of a lot of what people are complaining about. Like, oh, we're a parasite upon the planet. We need to kill ourselves. Okay, fair, dude. Except we do generate a lot of stuff, right? We generate more food than we need, actually. We have a problem distributing that food. Different problem. Uh, we generate a lot of stuff in excess, for sure. And some of that is considered luxury. Absolutely. Some of that luxury is a function of inefficiency, and some of that luxury is a function of exemplification of things that can be replicated once they've been instantiated at great cost at a lower cost. You look at the history of the microwave oven, for example, or the refrigerator. I mean, these were luxury items. The microwave came out of military technology, as many, 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 many pieces of technology did. In fact, every piece of technology pretty much came out of military need. Military needs are all excess needs by definition. And that's one of the problems. But it's not really a problem. It's just part of a pattern, a cycle. But recognizing the parasitic nature through AI learning to program itself effectively, it's not quite there yet, again, but fact of the matter is, you can write some pretty interesting things. It just costs you a lot longer than it would to know programming. If you already knew how to code, you wouldn't be using AI to code, I'll tell you that much. Just that nature, just that pattern. I'm just trying to get people to see it. And I thought this is a good way to sort of tease that out. And of course, I'll probably do a better video of this on navigating patterns, and I can figure out how to talk to that audience there about it. But I wanted to give it a shot. Let me know what you think. If you get some thoughts, comments, likes, whatever. Everybody else who wants to listen to me ramble, it's a good rant. Just something to think about.